So as we take this time to settle in here at the beginning of our time together, and for those joining us on the recording, grab a pen and paper, have it near you. We're going to do our opening treatment combined with a visualization that's going to be about our topic tonight. So just allow ourselves to settle on in. So go ahead and close our eyes. Feel the chair beneath us. Feel the floor beneath our feet. And allow our breath to just fall into its rhythm, acknowledging and loving everything that's come before this very moment, and knowing that it will be there at the end of 90 minutes, and taking this time to dig into a beautiful and wonderful, meaningful, intentional topic of conscious conflict tonight, and knowing that everything that is explored is absolutely perfect and divine. And as with any learning that we do as spiritual leaders in community, we are bettered by it and take it out into our environments and create and recreate even more around us, ever evolving, and recognizing that experience of oneness that brings us here tonight, and knowing that that divinity that is that oneness exists inside each and every one of us here, and everyone who is joining us on the recording, everyone in our community. We look into the eyes of others and see the absolute divine that we know is simply a reflection of what is inside of us. And as we move through our lives, acting as mirrors for each other, we know that what shows up for us is essentially a piece of us. We know that as we move through experiences in our lives, that we get opportunities to work through, to address, to visit, revisit, to try out different ideas and different endings and different solutions to some things that look maybe the same or similar from other times in our lives. And so we know as we smooth out those rough edges, and as Dr. Kathy Hearn says, we grow up all over each other in spiritual community. We know that this time that we sit here together is absolutely a divine appointment. So in opening up to the experience of tonight, allow ourselves to just take another breath in and exhale. And just notice this idea of conscious conflict. Just notice what comes up for you around that. Questioning, certainty, confusion, a definition. So take a moment and complete a very simple statement. For me, conscious conflict is. So go ahead and fill that in. Maybe it's a word, a phrase, a sentence. Open your eyes when it's right and take note of anything you need to take note of. And then as that exits your consciousness, your conscious mind here, allow it to just go onto paper and simply sit back in closed eyes in contemplation, reflection again, and we will move on to the next question. Conscious conflict is. And as we know that the people around us, as wonderful and challenging as they may be, are always divine gifts to us. And as we approach that with a sense of humor and a sense of reflection, we complete the statement, I know my congregation is a mirror when. I know my congregation is a mirror when. All these beautiful people show up as wonderful mirrors for us. And then let's lean into the pre-work, homework of the sheet around 4 guidelines. You don't have to have the sheet with you, but just consider current or recent experiences in spiritual community. And for yourself, if you were to vocalize or document a few guidelines that you know you have for yourself around communicating, and especially when there's misunderstanding or conflict, you probably have a particular guiding rule, for instance, for yourself. Maybe it's something that you don't want to cross a line, a boundary. So you probably have a few rules that you might not even have acknowledged as rules or guidelines. So go ahead. When it comes to communication, these are the things that are important to me. This is the way I like to operate. So just go ahead and declare them out. Don't worry about the exact words or the exact English or anything like that. We tend to find these guidelines or these rules, these boundaries for ourselves through experience. We tend to find them by having experiences where we bump into the things that are really important to us. So just take note of anything you know to be true for yourself. Okay, and when you're done with that, let's sit back and complete our opening meditation, contemplation, reflection, visualization. Okay. Let's take a breath in and allow ourselves to exhale. And grounding into our center, feeling our sit bones, feeling that rootedness of our feet, feeling that experience of being both settled and centered, yet awake and alive and open. And with this brief exploration that we have done, we give thanks for the opportunity for a time to sit down as leaders and reflect. Our words and our thoughts are traveling around with us each day, and it's rare and unusual to stop and reflect on what is important to us and what we really mean when we say something like conscious conflict, or when we think about how we like to play together and with other people, where our boundaries are around communication. So know that this is a perfect opportunity to explore this tonight. From this place of gratitude, we release these thoughts and ideas into the universal divine to be acted upon only ever in the affirmative. And I invite you to say with me, and so it is. Okay, here we go. So, as we do a brief check-in here with each other, the thing in that experience that stood out for you might have been a guideline you didn't know that you had, or might have been the completion of your conscious conflict or maybe it was the mirroring. So who would like to go first? Just remind us of the community you come from. I feel like we haven't done this in a little bit. And go ahead with your own thing that stood out for you. Who'd like to go first? Okay, go ahead. Whoever would like to go first, just unmute and go ahead.
I am in the Dayton, Ohio, USA community, CSL Dayton. Conscious conflict is not running from what needs to be said, and that I realize has really been fed by my 10 years at Dayton. Our senior minister readily admits that she's very conflict averse. And what bothers me is that she's really changed in the last few years in teaching people to become ministers. She has really changed and has really kind of moved toward being willing to be in conflict, in a conscious sort of conflict with people. But I see a lot of people around her not wanting to give her that space and not wanting to give her that the ability to be that way. So it really bothers me to. I mean, I know that's why my that's what informed my answer, but watching her try to change that culture, it's really, really difficult.
Yeah. And I hear that in waves, I think, throughout our organization. I don't want to broad brush it, but I think sometimes we call it bypass, and we have this idea of spiritual bypass. So you've heard me before break the bypass down into all the different kinds: the conflict bypass, the communication bypass, the financial bypass. We got them all. We do them all. Pick a card. So this is always a hottie here. Okay, who'd like to go next?
I can go next.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the things that, so for me, conscious conflict is a recognition that there is no right or wrong, only perspectives that we all get to discover together. And so as I was writing down my conflict values, I recognize that what's really important to me is that that firstly, we're in integrity, and that we have honesty and authenticity, and that with that we also come to that conversation with an awareness that everybody has a perspective, and that the perspectives are neither right or wrong or good or bad. And so from that, also flowing non-judgmental and honoring language, and not finger pointing, name calling kind of language. And gentleness and compassion with each other and for ourselves as well. And those are my values in conflict. Those are my values in how I would like to see things unfold. And what I was saying just before we got started was that I recognize that we don't have a lot of open conflict. Because what happens is, instead of people being honest and in integrity and being authentic, and I would rather know about an issue and be able to work through it and to honor that issue and honor that person in whatever way. But what more often than not happens is that if there is conflict, we don't find out about it because the person just doesn't come back.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you. You had quite a list there for the values and whatnot, and it very easily spilled out of you. So I want you to hold on. I'm glad you documented it too, because we're going to go through a couple of cycle pieces and some tools, and I'm wondering how you can insert some of that in there and get maybe a different outcome or a different approach. Okay. Who'd like to go next? I will pick you. I mean, there you go. Thank you, Cassandra.
I can go next.
Yeah.
I just have to say, before I do this, just because it's so exciting, that I was in White Rock over this last weekend, and it was just so amazing to be back. Yeah, and it's going really well, and our house is going on the market in a couple of weeks, and everything is just moving forward, and we're really moving.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for letting me share that good news.
Oh my gosh, we share it with you. Yes. So what's stood out for you in that?
It's interesting how I'm just realizing that this move is so exciting. It's like dream come true. And as we're getting closer, the stress levels are getting higher, and some of the uncertainties are coming up, and my husband and I were grouchy with each other, and unconsciously, like, we didn't even realize it, and then we realized it, and we're like, oh, we're going to stop that. But it just reminds me, what I said is that conscious conflict is sacred, because to me it's something wanting to emerge. It's like the tension of the seed that's underground getting ready to like break the surface to come into light, come into awareness. And so to me, that's a very important part of spiritual awakening. I don't think it can happen without conflict. And that also really freaks me out because I'm conditioned to appease, and everybody just needs to be happy. And that, I definitely have to work through that in terms of being a leader who can hold space for conscious conflict, which I have that intention.
Okay, great. Okay. You saw there was lots of nods, by the way. I think the other participants are in partnership in this call, so they all can feel that there's something that's happened that has the couple in in a rubbiness. Okay, then we got 2 L's. Which L would like to go? Go, Les.
Okay, so my completed statement was, for me, conscious conflict is having the willingness to have difficult conversations in love. And I too, like my valuable colleague, have been trained, and I'm trying to untrain myself from this culture of appeasement and just be nice and get along to get along, and it doesn't matter as much to me as it matters to them, so I'll just let them have their way. And I'm finding as I shift, I've only been a licensed minister for less than a year, so as I shift in this mentality that my mentor, Minister Kevin Busey, says the difference between being a practitioner and a minister is that a practitioner just deals with the person that's in front of them, and the minister has to hold the health of the entire community in their consciousness at the same time. And that means I can't afford to be in that place of it'll just simmer down, it'll go away, because if it's affecting anyone, it's affecting everyone, or at least a large piece of the community. And so I'm working on it. And my values list was kind of long too when I was thinking about it. Probably my primary ones are that there are many ways to be right, coming into things with a sense of mutual respect, and assuming that everybody in the room is coming in with positive intentions for the community.
Good. Okay, thank you. Leslie, want to round us out here?
Okay, so I actually didn't know how to answer the first 2 questions, and so I really am very grateful to what everyone has offered. I really, really like what Cassandra said about sacred and something wanting to come out, and so for me, I think part of it is that in the position that I'm in, I haven't had a lot of experience with groups of people. Like and as being a practitioner student right now, the sort of the one-on-one, or even just for myself, really is where the conflict is occurring. And so the work that I am doing is, I guess the sort of guiding rules applies very much to me, before anyone else, which is to know that the person, or even I, am not my story, or the person is not their story. To always listen with an open heart, mind, and just accepting that whatever is happening, even though it may suck and feel awful, is just circumstance, and beneath that there is spiritual truth, and to be knowing and listening from spiritual truth with whatever's going on, and which kind of is why I like the sacred, trying to push out, was that underneath all them, it's not even underneath all the muck, because even the muck is a version of truth, of love, of God.
So we got some sacred muck. going on.
But this, yeah, I mean, I wrote, for me, conscious conflict is, and then I went to write something and I just wrote, I don't know, but I have a much better
Okay.
sort of, I guess, some options to consider after hearing everyone else speak. So thank you.
Yeah, let's see what calls to you tonight. I feel before we hop into the slides, and I will do the summary slide deck again and flip it out to you, because there's some great tools and pieces on there that I think maybe you would want to use with others or have a reminder of. But let's just get something out. So grab your pen and paper. What I'd like you to do, I'm going to give you a maximum of 3 bullet points for this. When it comes to conflict, you can put conscious or not in front of it. You can put anything, but the word conflict is there. When it comes to conflict, the things that I'm afraid of are, so what are you afraid of? I'm going to give you a maximum 3 bullets. What's going to happen? What is the fear there? I avoid if it's not cooking for you, I avoid conflict because I don't want the following things to happen, is another way to put that.
Are we talking about within community or just in general?
You and the way you handle conflict, ideally your community, but the way you're doing it in your life is also probably the way it's folding over into your community. Even if it looks a little different, the source of the fear is often the same. So if we're people pleaser in our family or in our one-on-one intimate relationship, it's quite possible we're a people pleaser with the board or with the people who walk into Lesia's administration office at Unity. You know, if we're all into the smoothing because we're afraid of people not liking us or whatever that fear is. Some people are afraid of loud voices, are afraid of contention, there's all kinds of interesting things, and it's so unique because it's our bag. It comes to us from our set of experiences. Okay, and when you're ready, let's go into the chat for this. And so for your bullets, if you'd like to just put the one that really just flew out of your mind and into your pen, go ahead. Or if you have the room to do the 3 of them, or 2 if you did 2 instead, go ahead and put it in the chat, and then we'll start with the slides, and you'll have some context for that and the other questions from the reflection. We got Stephanie's in there. Stephanie, thank you. Lose my temper, so like lose control. Okay, say things I regret. I think there's a meme in that. I've seen something float around like that. Yeah. Leslie being seen as, oh, not spiritual enough. You cannot be angry at a minister, apparently. My mother has told me so. She was the first person to say, well, that's not very ministerial of you. I am in the recruitment for the executive director role to replace Steve Burton, and I've finished all the interviews. I'm in the final piece. My mom is the most impatient person. She told me exactly what she wanted to get on the phone and go say to those people. It's so nice when your mother wants to do that. I had to remind her that's not very ministerial what you want to say, Mom. She's so ready to know the answer. Okay. You're going to be fired. I'm sorry, I'm laughing at that one. It's like, who else is going to do this work? Come on. Fire me. Yeah, the gossip, aggressive behavior, losing congregants because of, okay. Okay. I think we just have, Tammy, are you putting some things in there too? There we are, okay. Feel awful for a while, lose people. Release your inner dragon. Oh, I bet your inner dragon's colorful.
It is.
Can picture it.
Sparkly.
sparkly, my blingy inner dragon. Okay, I'm gonna flip to the slides, and we'll hop in and out. And we have about half of the group here today, so the others will be doing this remotely and afterwards. So I think you'll find some things in here that will definitely help you. Let's see here. Okay, we're at number 7. Can you believe we're at number 7? Holy crap-a-doodles. So here we are. And in tonight's conversation, here's what I'm going to cover. So what makes conflict conscious? And you're going to declare your conflict profile. What do you mean I don't do conflict? Yeah, you do. There's one called avoiding for those people that think they don't. My 4 rules for communication, and you have a handout that went out in the email, and if you don't have it printed or whatnot with you, you can always just do the documentation on a piece of paper and use the tool later, and you can use the tool in your community as well. Congregants as mirrors, oh, don't they just show up? And some tools and we can look at for what is next. So being in conscious conflict, there isn't a definition that's a standard dictionary type definition for something called conscious conflict. It's kind of like my spiritual intrapreneurship. So conflict, standing on its own in the Oxford English Dictionary, the online version, is a serious disagreement or argument, typically a protracted one. And sometimes these things go on for a bit, or they've had a life. They've had legs before they ever get vocalized. Sometimes that happens too. So I've underlined a few words here in this particular line of describing. And so notice the escalation. It's a disagreement that could turn into an argument, that could become a struggle, that can show up as a clashing of opposing wishes or needs, that can result in an incompatibility. Now, I didn't design this definition this way. This is the actual definition set of words. But I noticed that it doesn't escalation, so I underlined the words. So then conscious conflict, to remain self-aware and compassionate. So self-aware is the inward act when we're in conflict, and compassionate is the outward act when we're in conflict, as we move through conflict to a solution that benefits the highest good. And the highest good doesn't end up with people on either side of the table. The highest good isn't someone wins and someone loses. The highest good is that it is really the best decision that could be made in that moment for every stakeholder in the situation. Which, by the way, if you made the decision 2 weeks ago or 2 months from now, you may find that that decision would be different. The conflict outcome might be different. Yeah. So with this definition, we're unable to remain self-aware, remain compassionate, and observe and watch and notice and be in the moment, moving through conflict to a solution that we can guarantee intentionally benefits the highest good if we're in fear. So that's why I had you call out the fear pieces, because we just want it to be over, and whatever the shortest path is to that sometimes. And I'm going to keep going, and we can roll a couple of these ideas in here together, and we'll stop for a conversation. So you had your 4 rules for communication, and I call them rules, but they're guidelines or a playbook. I've called it a playbook. So I've done some coaching with leaders in humanitarian environments, not-for-profit, and also spiritual community. And so we can get into conflict, and usually the times that we're addressing it is when we're really like fully in it, and something we've butted up against something, we can't name it. It's triggered our fears. It's triggered something from our past. We're feeling unsafe. And then if I ask somebody, so what line got crossed there? They're like, I don't know, because by then they're so far into it, they really can't have perspective. So it's really interesting. If we look at a bunch of those that have happened in our lives, And we think, because I keep having this experience, integrity must be really important to me. And so one of my guidelines, involves that, or being heard, or people taking the time to listen to each other, or processing time. So we have the conversation, we make some space and reflection, we go back. You have guidelines about how you want to enter into conflict and resolve conflict in your life, and you don't even know you have them, because we all have them. And then what can happen too is, because we have a guideline or a rule for ourselves, we can make the mistake that it's universal. And this is where the right, wrong, and the shoulds come in. So because I think that everybody should take time to process and step away and sleep on it, well, like, that's the right thing to do, right? That's a good thing, and it's the right thing to do. So people who aren't doing that are, well, wrong or stupid, or they're not good people. Like, how can that be okay, when really it really is our guideline, our values that show up. So I did put here, what does this look like at my center? So you can do this work after the time together. So if I have this guideline, how does this look at my center? And that can be positive or negative. So it looks like people avoid me. It looks like people are confused. It looks like people show up and push because I'm taking too long. It shows up as, people are caring and concerned. It shows up as people having curiosity. It shows up as people feeling heard. Like, there's a whole spectrum, and it takes a bit of reflection to look at how that is showing up. And so I have the column there, current status. So if 10 is, this is working for me in my center right now, that's a 10. And if it's not working, that's a 1. So you can look at, okay, this guideline that I have, it's a really good idea. I think it's a really great idea. This integrity or trust or listening or processing or whatever. But it's really being adopted at about a 6. It's like working at about a 6 level. So then you have an opportunity to step back and look at, how could I reframe this, or how does it need to get delivered or introduced or worked differently? Then I have something called TAW, and I have a slide on that, so I'm going to ask you to hold that, and you're going to go to the source of how you can move that status higher, how you can increase the receptivity of your community to this guideline. You are the role model for conflict resolution and conscious conflict in your environment, and that can feel heavy, but we're being watched for everything we do and say, and the color of our lipstick. It's all women here today. Yeah. So we have this unconscious conflict versus conscious conflict. If you are in ministerial school and did a class with De Quincey, he would not like this slide, because unconscious means that you're not awake, like you're literally, without consciousness, like in a medical way. So it's sort of non-conscious conflict, but we can call it, amongst us, we're going to call it unconscious, which for us and our purposes tonight is the less evolved and aware version of conflict. So in unconscious conflict, we see some of these things. So maybe you see some of these at your center, or in your current or recent community, with the suspicion and drama, strong words, maybe even heated discussion, and followed by silence, and not the kind of, we're going to go away and sleep on this and let's get together tomorrow. It's a protracted absence of communication, which feels very different energetically. Or a sense of someone's giving in or giving up, like the compromise is deep, or feeling unheard on either side. You also might see some of these conscious conflict things occurring, these signals at your community. So you might see open dialogue and communication. You might see discussion that has time to process and follow up. You might see people wanting to be involved, people wanting to really coming from a heart space to solve a problem, even if it doesn't go smoothly. And you can feel attempts or see attempts for people to be included and heard. And so unconscious conflict looks like this. Some of the things that you might see or experience. And it sounds like some of these things being said. You said you would. They were thinking, so as if I know what they're thinking. I know that they want, I haven't asked them, but I know. And I know what they meant was this. And then the superlative, the catastrophic. They never, well, it's not fair, or you're wrong, or yeah, maybe you've heard those things. So being in conscious conflict looks like this. And I think sometimes in being a minister where we may want to not rock the boat, and we want everyone to be happy, and we want to have positive harmony around us, we don't set boundaries. So we have not set boundaries to be role modeled. And I don't mean heavy-handed, but people need to clearly see. And if we're not solid in ourselves of our own playbook, those 3 or 4 in that sheet that I gave you to fill out, then you can't be demonstrating them consistently and reiterating. But if you're setting a boundary and you're comfortable with something in your playbook, then you've got something to go back to. So recall when we're going to handle it like that. Recall when this happened and we learned this and this didn't work, we're going to handle it like that. Remember, what I want for us always is that the following happens. And when you know yourself, you can keep repeating those 3 or 4 things in different situations, and you're really teaching people how to treat you and how to be in that environment and how to treat each other. So it sounds like some of these things. And I'll give you these lists as well. Okay. So I'm going to walk you through this. I'm going to have you put this in an order of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we're going to come out of the slides for a moment. So what is your conflict profile? I was actually asked this in my interview this week. So which approach do I take for resolving conflicts? So let me walk you through. We all have 5. We all have all 5 in us, but they're in an order. So your most likely preference, like I would typically handle it first this way, then this. So if someone got to see you handle conflict over a period of time, like a year or 5 years, they would say that mostly you handle it this way, then this way, then this way. So you can do this in your own preference and understanding of yourself tonight. So number 1 is directive or authoritarian, and people can think, well, I don't want to be that. However, sometimes that's exactly who you need to be in times of safety, reputational concern, emergencies, where things get escalated to you as a leader or a person who is in charge of something. You absolutely want to be able to pull that out of your toolkit. There is a place for it. So some people look at it and go, oh, bad, wrong, I would never be that. That's not me. Well, it's hard to be a leader if you can't pull that out. It's not the primary tool maybe in ministerial that we pull out and use, but it has to be in there somewhere. Number 2, collaborate. So to gather the ideas around us and figure out how we can work together with them. And maybe we can take a piece and a piece and make it a new thing. Okay, so that's collaborate. Number 3, accommodate. So in order to make this move, I'm just going to release any ideas that I have about it, and I'm just going to be accommodating. I'm going to sit this out, which again is a great tool to have, because you want to pick your battles, as we say, or you want to not be going into every single situation with like a 9 out of 10 energy towards it. Compromise is where you're willing to have a certain portion of what you want occur in the solution, knowing that sometimes 70% of what you want happens, sometimes 40%, maybe 90%, and you know that each time is different because it just depends on the situation, and so that we're willing to compromise to move things along. And then number 5 is avoid, and this is deeper than accommodate. This is like the minute a voice raises, the minute someone demonstrates. One of the things we saw on the previous slides were like, I check out. I might be present here, but I completely check out. Okay. So go ahead and put yours in order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to hop out of this. Okay. Has anyone seen those 5 conflict styles before? Okay, Tammy, you have. Okay. Okay. So, how about in the chat we put our number 1? What's the one you find yourself most demonstrating in your work in your community? And it can be different with your kids or your relationship, but we're talking about being community leaders here. So collaborate, okay? Did anyone notice that consensus is not there? Did that come up for anyone? Because consensus is not a conflict resolution approach, it's a decision-making approach. In order to have consensus, you can exhibit any of the 5 behaviors and experiences, approaches, or attitudes around conflict and still result in something that is produced that we'll call consensus. If we are collaboratively compromising, then consensus can feel like a really natural output of that as a decision-making tool. If we are accommodating, avoiding, or dominating, then consensus can feel like I've lost. Consensus can feel like I gave more than I really wanted to. I gave up too much of what I really preferred. Yeah, I love that, Stephanie. Yeah, Martin Luther King. A genuine leader is not a searcher for consensus, but a molder of consensus. Yeah, because if everyone's opinions are included and you're working that way, and there's some compromise and there's collaboration, maybe a bit of accommodation happening, you know, that can occur. It is powerful. I love that. So we had some compromise and collaborate. Okay, great, wonderful. Anyone want to say anything at this point before I go on into the next part of things? Yes, Cassandra.
Yes, I wanted to say that in my last community, even though no one really liked it, the general way of decision making was consensus driven. So of course it was lengthy and kind of clunky. And I was just thinking that it seems to me that that consensus decision making tool actually kind of leads to avoiding, dominating, or accommodating. It actually seems to kind of tie into that. But we always seem so stuck in terms of changing the way we made decisions. So it just kind of seems to me that when we're looking at changing the way we address conflict, which is probably a cultural change, which probably takes a few years, I'm guessing, to change the culture around something in a community, that it seems like we need to be changing our decision making at the same time. That we have to be doing kind of those at the same time.
Yeah, I think from a leadership perspective, one will flow into the other. And so I think we need to see demonstrated some pretty significant or tangible disagreement. What I mean is everyone is not on the same page, and to be in conflict and to have it handled beautifully. And I am going to guess that in communities all over our organization, this happens in back rooms. And what gets presented is the nice little tied in a bow consensus thing at the end of it. And it's like that sloppy kind of, you know, and I've been in this in my times with boards and in business and friendship. And sometimes it, you know, it goes like, I absolutely hate what you're putting out right now. I totally disagree. I get where it's coming from, and I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. And you know what? I love you and I love what's going on, and I know we're going to get to it. So, why don't we pause, or what needs to be asked? I've got 5 questions in a slide here that can unhook us from that stuckness and that feeling of this. And I think one of the things we fear is that you get into that loggerheads, and we don't know how to get out of it. And it's okay to be saying, like, I don't come at it from the same place you do. I don't even think we have the same values around it. But when we keep the highest good as the outcome, and we can go back and check as we move through conflict that's what occurs, I think we are killing things with niceness. Like, that nicey nice stuff is not doing anyone any favors. And it reminds me of when an old-fashioned way of having parents argue, where I heard about this thing, never happened in my family, but that I had friends whose parents wouldn't argue in front of them. Like, they argued behind closed doors. And then these kids had no conflict coping mechanisms as like young adults and going into adults. It's like they didn't see it role modeled. They didn't see it demonstrated. They didn't see like a knock them down, drag them out, like, I am not wanting this to go forward, but I love you, so we're going to figure it out, aren't we? Like, that is so powerful to see that. And I don't know, this denomination association thing has a potential to blow up a bit. So does the next gen. We've got a few things cooking on the minister listserv these days. So we have lots of opportunity, I think, coming in the very near future to try this stuff out differently, and to be okay with it all, and to have it be a bit more public and not keep it in behind the doors. Because then people get out in community and they're just thinking, like, the spiritual bypass, kumbaya, okay, I will deny all my wants so that we can just have harmony. And then that festers and holds in me, and then I just walk out the door one day, like Tammy talks about, and I'm just not coming back because I don't have the skills to deal with it, and I haven't seen it modeled in front of me at the community to really kind of go, okay, if I need a way to be able to express this. And one of the things we talked about in the client service piece, congregant as client, was that exit survey and the exit call to being able to have people have conversations like that, or to do a survey, a temperature check survey about every 18 months or so. And I think Leslie and Karen are doing one right now, getting ready. And so that people have that avenue. And then later, if they come and complain, you can say, hey, we put this out like every 12, 18 months so that we can hear what people won't say to us on a Sunday. Okay. Geez, there's just a little to talk about with this. Okay. I'm going to hop back into the slides and go a couple more slides and hop back out. Okay. And so then there'll probably be some more. Okay. So congregants as mirrors. I don't know the look on that kid's face. Any congregant ever approached you like that? Like, that's just something I want to tell you. Yeah, I got a little feedback. Yeah. So I put this in our reflection at the beginning because isn't it interesting how when we're working on something, stuff comes up? Or if you think of the congregant as mirrors, just take note of any sort of theme. If you can see that there are several conflicts that have happened recently or over a period of time in your community, and if you were able to put them in a basket, what would they be called? Because I'm going to give you 3 baskets. Now, these are the baskets that we would find in the Middle East with the snakes in them. So they really are conflict baskets. They are your baskets of conflict. So what I'm going to have you do is just reflect for a moment. I'm only giving you 3 baskets. If you were to categorize the sources of conflict in your community environment, what would they be? I spoke with a minister last week, and they call them out as money, Sunday, like the flow of Sunday, and what was the other one? I think it was something to do with the building. And that's a pretty specific situation. But when they go back to it, you probably have about 3 places that it stems from. So just notice those. And then what I'd like you to do is, if you were to put those in like a 1, 2, 3, what would be your primary one? So if I gave you a primary basket, like those 3 baskets, what's the toughie? If one rose up, because it has a snake in it, right? If one rose up out of the line of the 3, what would that one be? The one that most wants to be addressed. It's the most achy one. So here's a temperature chart. So the achy one that you have, the one that's most painful, where are you and your community on this temperature gauge? Are you like mildly distressed as a community about this particular incident? Or are you very upset? Or has the anger beast, the dragon, been released? So take the temperature. And this is fun and cute, and it'll be in your slides. And it's actually something that when someone comes in and is sort of bursting, it's something that you can also use as a tool. So where are we with this? And so if you use it as a tool like that, if someone comes in and say, you know what, I'm furious and frustrated. Well, great, you're not the angry beast. The dragon or the snake is still in the basket. So if we were to back that down a bit, what would a couple of notches below it look like? And what would need to happen to release or to decompress that experience for you? And what would make you calm and steady about this? So it's a different way of thinking about it. And I do have a few tools that you're going to see that you can take away for conversations as well that will help you and help you when people show up in front of you. So you can stay conscious, you can stay present and stay self-aware, and help the person stay self-aware so that you can get into action that's really intentional and not just, what can I say to get you out of my office as fast as possible? Okay, so you have your primary basket and you've got that gauge. So let's use the chat again. What is your primary basket? So you had the 3 baskets. What is your primary basket? The source of the most conflict right now, or maybe it's been the same for years. Okay, the belief systems, okay. Power balance, okay, yeah. Social justice from the platform, okay, yeah, that is yeah, that was in our podcast recently, Leslie. How political can we be? Should we be? Should is a good sign that it's conflict in there. Okay. Is anyone still putting theirs in? A community expecting change and growth without being clear on what change and growth wants and without actually doing anything about it. Yeah, can we? That's where you need a magic wand. And I actually had a magic wand in a number of offices where I worked. And I would hand out the magic wand to like the head of accounting if he needed it that day or whatnot, because we want to be at the end of the change without having to do anything in the middle, right? Because the middle is the yucky stuff, by the way. You'll see that in my cycle of conflict, right? Can I just like click my heels and end up on the other side of this thing because it's uncomfortable? Yeah. So practitioner core, okay. Stephanie, anything about your beautiful practitioner core that is a source of conflict? Would you like to put an adjective in there? Keep it clean?
No. That's absolutely that's my personal basket. There's a lot of stuff that's happened in the last, well, I guess since the beginning of the year. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of old stuff coming up that everybody wants to deal with in the old way. And Sonia, you and I have talked about this. I'm not opposed to being the bad guy. I'm just not. I'm not opposed to being the bad guy. So it's sometimes it's a little sticky.
Yeah.
I understand that it's not about me, so I don't lose my temper. But
Yeah. We watch people process their old stuff right in front of us, right? And if we can stay outside that and watch it with compassion, we are a better tool in that conflict solution. We are able to better participate and guide and lead it in the role that we're supposed to be in. If someone comes along and triggers you, or we're so compelled as humans to meet people at the energy that they come in at. So they come in at a 7 or 8 energy in the conversation, and we join them there, and then you're off to the races. And it's taking that moment to be present. It's really interesting. I think I hear a lot of congregant members, community members, talk about that at holiday time, especially, Stephanie, and I know yours is a different situation, but when people go back to visit the families that haven't changed because they went away and they changed, and the family is still dealing with the stuff in the same old way, I think there's an entire ministry in that for us. It's seasons greetings ministry. Seasons greetings, seasons meetings. Okay, we've got some stuff from Cassandra. Thank you. The entitlement and the practice. Yeah. And if you are a prac person and you move off into ministry too, sometimes that creates some stuff for people. Yeah. Okay, we got some nodding. Tammy, did you want to say something?
Steph and I created a workshop for 1 year that we did called Loving Well During the Holidays, and it was all about how to get through the holidays in a loving way with your family and all the expectations that come up.
Yeah, I think if Leslie Goodwin was to do that workshop, it would be called "You Don't Look Good in Orange," and mine would be called "It's Not Worth the Jail Time." But I think it's the same sentiment. We're just having a wacky sense of humor. But Leslie, would that be about right? I think I've heard you say that a few times about people and their families.
Yeah, I think it would be called "You Don't Look Good in Orange." Orange is not your color, and the subtitle would be "Don't Stab People in the Face."
A holiday survival kit. Wow, they're tough down in Phoenix.
Do not cut a bitch. Do not cut a bitch.
The unspoken expectations are really interesting, and that's part of the reason why I had you declare your playbook of your 4 things that you want to see happen in your community. And if you want to look online, Edward Villian from Santa Rosa did a 1-pager on communication, and it's a really great dialoguing tool for groups, for boards and whatnot, as kind of a playbook. But you can make it your own and have your own things in terms of the vision for your community. But it's a great open source document online that you can see, and it can inspire you if you're looking for something. So people can't know what we expect as a design for our community, and people are looking to the leader to help them understand what it is that the leader wants, and not from a dominating point of view, but you're cultivating an environment. And if you're not sure inside yourself, then something that looks a bit haphazard and might even be viewed as preferential treatments or inconsistency can show up. So if you're having inconsistent experiences with people around you, it's likely that you're signaling as a leader too that there's an inconsistency, or you don't really mean what you really said, or under certain situations I will change these rules. People watch for it, and it is a very parental situation, whether we want to view it that way or not. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go back to the share, and we'll do a few more slides and hop out again. Okay, so you have the baskets. So I have 3 cycles here, okay? So don't worry about taking this down. I'd rather that you be present with it unless something really calls to you, or take a picture if you want, but this is coming to you. And I've got 3 of these in a row because we're going on a bit of a journey around conflict. So if you studied conflict in conflict relations or management relations in school, you would have learned about a conflict cycle. So essentially, what happens from a psychological perspective for us is that we have an experience, and then we go into the processing of that experience, the filtering or the relating it to, this sounds like, this feels like, and some of this is done consciously and some of it's done unconsciously or subconsciously. And so we connect it to other experiences that we've had. So we use our own filtering system of our life and the experiences that have occurred for us, which helps us formulate a response. And then in responding out or taking action, then something occurs in the environment because we've now put our own action or our response out there with other people's responses or on its own, depending on the situation. So then we see what plays out. And then from that, we end up believing that that was really a good thing, or I processed that badly. I'm just being really simple about it. I learned that I'm not heard. I learned that people won't listen to me. I learned that I bullied. I learned that I'm being bullied. I learned that this doesn't work. So it's all the beliefs that we start to build, which then we take into our next experience and adds to the way we relate. So we're constantly doing this. We're doing it, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times a day. And then if we look at conscious conflict, what we do is, because we've been practicing, reflecting, learning, evolving in our lives, we're able to observe our experience like, oh, look at this board meeting. Isn't this interesting, what I see happening here? And then we question our beliefs. Is what I believe really working, or do I need to consider something else? Do I need to change something else about what I think I know? And so we go into a questioning. And then because we've questioned it, and we maybe even shifted some of our beliefs or assumptions or expectations, we formulate a response. And it's actually an intentional response at this point, because we intend for it to occur in the way that the action takes place. And we have an expectation of what is going to happen when we put that out there. So we act on our intention by producing action. Other people might put their action into that same conflict. It might show up as words, thoughts, actions over a period of time. We reflect on the outcome. So, how is that working for you, as Dr. Phil would say? Is there anything that I need to consider? Is this the outcome that we thought? Do we need to pause and go back? Is this about the highest good? Did we miss a piece in here? And so we go into that cycle again. So really, the standard conflict cycle has us have that experience, has us relate, has the response, has the consequences, has the beliefs. And so when we look at conscious conflict as a cycle, it's observation, internal inquiry, outward intention, showing up as our actions, and an opportunity to reflect. You're going to get all of this in the slides, but when you put them side by side, it's really interesting, because we're unable to do this stuff if we've been triggered, if we're trying to avoid something, if something's really taken us by surprise, if we're not clear about our own guidelines, our own playbook, so to speak. Okay. So you can use that here when we look at, what does this look like at my center? Maybe it helps you as you're moving through the cycle. When you look at your guideline that you made for yourself, for instance, guideline number 1, if we go back to the conscious conflict cycle, my guideline really shows up where it's about being a more keen observer, or my guideline is about being intentional, or my guideline is about reflecting and everyone having the opportunity to reflect. So you'll find that your guidelines are reflective of one portion of the cycle or another. And what I'd like you to watch out for and notice, and this is a great exercise to do with your teams. If everybody could call out what they actually have as expectations around communication, it'd be very shocking once it's out in words and spoken and written. What you'd want to watch out for is if all of your playbook rules or guidelines are in one piece of the cycle. That shows that there hasn't been a consideration for the other pieces. And so if you're stepping into conflict and you're getting stuck somewhere, it's probably because you haven't actually created agreements with yourself and standards for the way you want to be in communication in conflict for the other pieces. So this is where, like, if you find yourself triggered around getting into the action piece, there you haven't created a guideline or an agreement with yourself around how you want that to look. And that's an interesting thing to notice as well. And you can take that into some work and reflection post this workshop. Okay. So I have some conscious conflict tools I'm going to share, but I'm going to come out for a second. Anybody want to say anything about those cycles? There's always a lot of information I'm passing over in these sessions, and the intention really is that you can take it away and do some work with people in your environment to make your environment better for your own spiritual entrepreneurship. The better the clarity, the easier it is to lead it. Okay. Anything in there stand out for you? A question, a comment? I just want to give you a chance to call it out. Yeah, Cassandra, you said that you have the Edward Billion document and you put it out to the group. Thank you. Okay.
I'm wondering, like how does it work when you, the one side of the conversation is in a conflict that is not conscious, and the other side is moving into a more conscious way of responding and a conscious way of being in intention. Because sometimes, you know, like I just recognize that there are situations where there we go. Conflict. I just recognize there are times when my I'm clear with my intentions, and you know what? Like, everybody has their own experience, and everybody has their own perspective that they're coming from, and so regardless of what my intentions are and what my actions are, the response is going to try it to pull me back into an unconscious way of responding.
Yeah, I have the tools that we're about to go into to help you go back and forth with people, but I want to just say something about that. I'm going to mute for 2 seconds and close the door because my friend who owns the house has just come home. Okay, so a couple of things to consider. Even if the other person doesn't want to be conscious about this conflict and wants to be old school and is going to sit in their triggers, just by the very nature of you staying in integrity with that process and staying in observation and staying in reflection and being intentional about your action and being able to vocalize that all along the path, you are really setting the tone for what is going to occur as the leader. So the minute you cross over and give up on that process, they know that you will do that. And it's not that they're even looking for it or even, you know, negatively intentioned. They're just learning from you, from your behavior. It's the first thing. Second thing I want to say is it's a dance. So I always do this dance analogy, and that is that if you are doing the waltz with somebody and you want to change it, so say it's always the same old triggers, and you want to do the salsa, that person has a couple of choices. They can switch in salsa with you. They can try to convince you to go back to the waltz. Or they can pick a third kind of dance and say, want to go here. So I use that analogy in coaching and in leadership because it really is the minute you try to make some change, and I know, Cassandra, you're mentioning like change can take a while, and it is consistently changing up that dance, and they'll see the patterning. But I'm going to walk you through the tools, and then I want to know if you think that one of these could be something that you would have as your go-to, because people usually see one and go, I want to use that one with so-and-so next time, or I'm bringing that to the board. So let's go in there and we'll come back out. I want to hear from you. Okay. Okay, so we've got some tools for you to take away. These are along the lines of the Jedi Mind Trick file. 5 questions. Anyone notice that there's 6? 5 questions. And then what is my next step? So these 5 questions can be asked outwardly for yourself and for others. And then number 6 is like, now what am I going to do with this information as the leader? So what is the source of the conflict? You can do this in reflection, or you can do this with a group. So say, for instance, you walk away from something that has really been contentious, you can actually sit and do this. Or you can say to a group, hey, folks, I think things are getting really jumbled and we really can't tell what's what, and it's really heated. Let's do these. So what is at the source of the conflict? And this is where I love to give people, like, I'm going to give you 2 bullet points or 1 sentence, 5 words, you know, keep it in the succinct, or otherwise they'll go into story, which is just a whole other vortex. What don't I know? What's missing? Because usually in conflict, remember back at the definition, it's a disagreement or an argument and a misunderstanding. And so sometimes the misunderstanding is that I'm actually missing a piece of information. And some of the information may be, you know, someone's feelings, or the background, or their belief system on it. Or it could be something really tangible, like, actually, we paid $5 for that last week. So you just don't know. Usually conflict comes from missing information. Something's missing. What is my part in this situation? And so you can ask that of others. If someone comes to you, like you say, Tammy, and they're in that place, like, okay, I'm going to need to ask you what is your part, what's their part, and what's your part. Even if you get them to draw a line down a piece of paper, what's your part, what's their part? What do I own? What do I not own? What do I have control over? What don't I have control over? What is the highest good for this situation? What are we all aiming at? And I know when I did the strategic planning workshop at the conference, I had a slide that said, let's row together to grow together. And a couple of people wrote me for that slide afterwards. And it was this idea of, can everyone around the table tell you what the outcome is that you're all striving for? Because I bet they can't. We're so caught down in the thing. And if you as a leader are feeling triggered, or feeling like, I'm a little scared of where this is going to go, I don't want people upset, I want to please the people, inviting them into that, can everyone just on a sticky note, and I've done this in a group of about 14 CEOs, write down on the sticky note what it is that we're trying to achieve. And you know, I get 14 sticky notes. And that just dissolves a lot of the conflict. And we go back to, you know, what is it that's missing? What don't we know? Can we all agree? Are we all rowing to the same thing? What's the highest good for this situation? And who needs to be involved in the solution? Because when we're in consensus, sometimes we're involving people that don't need to be at the table. Sometimes we're involving people that are actually not capable of being part of resolving the conflict. And we do that to be nice to them. And in being nice to them, we're really kind of freaking them out, and they're not necessarily always capable. And I realize we have volunteer boards and whatnot. So that's something that we need to manage. Maybe people step away and look at what needs to be resolved in the conflict and come back and present it to the wider group. Maybe it doesn't have to be all the group all the time doing all the stuff. And then as the leader, what's my next step? What do I want to do here? Okay. So this is a philosophy that I have. And this is called Don't Bring Me Dead Birds, as you can see. So this is something that I've used for years as a philosophy around conflict. And it's a 2-to-1 ratio. And so some of you might have heard me say this. As the leader, you can have, just like a cat comes or an animal comes and drops you like this gift, right? And you're like, oh, great, now I've got a dead bird. You know, now I got to do something with this. And if you're in a leadership role, you can feel like people are dropping dead birds all day long. They're coming by and they're like just handing you this stuff to deal with. And so one of the things that I instituted and made a joke about it, saying, don't bring me dead birds, is you have a 2-to-1 ratio. You're bringing me one problem, I want 2 solutions. So bring me, for every problem that you walk in my office with, or email me about, tell me 2 ways you think we might be able to resolve this. Now, what this does is it gets them started thinking about solution rather than being stuck down in the conflict. And even if, I'll tell people, even if the 2 solutions that you bring are kind of half cooked, it still tells me that you got the wheels turning, and it shifts them to solution from the conflict. They also may need to go talk to colleagues around them and invite them into the conversation in order to be able to suggest solutions. So that's great too, because then you get people connecting with each other. So there are things that only you can really resolve. And I go back to those high safety things where you may do that dominate style, which is like severe reputation issues, liability, safety issues, and emergency issues, where it immediately gets escalated to you, and of course it should be you. Those are not the type of things that can really take a long time to move through if it's in conflict. Any comments about this 2-to-1, my dead bird approach? Okay. You have an office staffer repeatedly knocking on your door because she wants to take the non-emergency phone. I saw this earlier. Yeah. So I wonder what the criteria is for her. You may need to come up with the criteria. It's that clarity. So here's the ones I want you to knock on the door for, right? We're all just getting to know each other. It's okay. But it's that making it okay. Being clear. I know. So tough. Don't look in orange. Remember that. Okay. So I have a few more here in terms of the tools. So the 2-to-1, don't bring me dead birds. And then the TAW that I mentioned earlier that's on your guide sheet. And we're coming around to the last couple of slides here. So thoughts, actions, and words. When we look at the source of conflict, we can source the conflict in something that someone is thinking, or we think they're thinking, or something we're thinking. And that it's a thought thing when there's no one speaking and there's no action happening, but yet there's conflict. Or the source of the conflict is something that was said, or the source of the conflict was behavior, it was actual action. Sometimes it's a combination, but generally you can go right back to one that superseded all of them. The reason I put this up, and it's in that a circular motion, because one, of course, informs the other, and we know that everything begins in thought, so I put that up top. But sometimes conflict doesn't even need to go further than thought to be conflict in the room, and these things pile up on each other. The reason I put this together at all is that the solution to the conflict is at the source of the conflict. So if it's an issue of something being said, you have to go back to what was said and role model or insist on, by setting boundary or expectation, what would be appropriate or what would be expected. And again, if you see action, you have to go back and do the forensics on that action with the person. And those 5 questions can be good for any of this sort of forensic work, I call it. And if it's the thinking, the amazing question around the thinking is, what's missing? What don't I know? Because people get up every day and do what makes sense to them all over the world. And so people don't generally get up and decide to mess up the day. It's often a tumbling set of interactions that result in conflict. And when we can pick apart in the forensics what's happening for that person, it's usually back at a thought, a word or something that's said, or action. So the resolution is back at the source. When you go back at the source and start from there and come back forward, this is how you can resolve conflict with people, with each other. This is a tool, I think, Tammy, that can work in that situation too. Okay, so a couple more slides and we're going to call it good. This is an interesting slide for leaders. You can use it for yourself and you can use it in your conversations with people. So if you want to have someone go do something different around conflict and you're not going to resolve the entire conflict, you want to send them away, you know, this is great for like she said, she said, he said, she said kind of stuff, you know, they said this and now I'm upset with them, and yeah, just this particular approach. So when you're doing it directively, it would kind of go like this. I'm going to model it, and then you can see how it can be done as a handed over item as well. So if I was being directive, I would say to someone, to when they're going to go away and go back into a conflict, okay, remember that the purpose of what's going on here, or the mandate is, or what we want to have achieved, it comes from this higher arching thing, comes from a project, an initiative, the purpose, what you're going to go away with. And this is what I need you to do. And this is when it needs to be done by. And this is what I want to see happen. And I'll know it's done. And you're going to follow up with me. And what's the time? And I wouldn't be that directive with someone, and I'd take a while to do it. It might be a 10, 15-minute conversation. What's really great is if you can get to a place as a leader where you are delegating this out, where they say to you, when you ask them, what's the purpose? What's the meaning behind doing this? And what action do you want to take? And when do you think would be appropriate for that? And what would success look like in that? What would you really want to see happen? And so how will I know that that happened? Tell me how you'd like to loop back with me. So then you're not doing the action and the activity of following up. You're not acting on any of this. You're not even directing. But sometimes it takes role modeling with people to have them be able to go away and handle a conflict situation in this way. So you're sort of moving people into action. And it might feel directive at first, but once they've done it a few times, and they're not going to know this is happening. You're just changing your approach ever so slightly. You're moving from a waltz to maybe, well, a tango is really drastic, but you're going to move off into a slightly faster dance. Okay. And then you may have seen this, and this is a fun, cute thing if you want to use it in your centers around think. So before people are stepping into sharing their views on something, is it true, helpful, inspiring, necessary, is it kind? And I'll send you this. So lastly, let's consider the following things here as leaders as we wrap up. That these 10 things, that it's always challenging. Even if it looks like the bully loves it, they're in pain in some way. So I think it's challenging for all parties. And we're all growing all the time, just at different paces. So we have to model how we be in this. We really do. And now you may be able to step in with some of what we've done tonight and be more intentional or more conscious about it, more deliberate, more demonstrative. And so that we set the tone with every thought, word, and action that we bring into our community. We really are being watched. So being intentional and even knowing for ourselves what we mean to have conveyed is so important. And there's always layers in any situation, which is why I use the word forensics in that thought, action, word piece in those 5 questions. If we go into meeting someone where they are and we just go straight into it without those that pausing to ask, we're not able to be able to be in observation and in consideration. And if we're running off with all the energy and getting excited and getting into the conflict, or we're backing away to stop it from resolving, then we're part of the issue. So being intentional about our actions and then stepping confidently into your chosen action. And that doesn't have to look particularly assertive. It's just people are going to see that it's solid, that you don't accept this, or that this is the way that you prefer, and they're going to see it, and it's going to take repetition and taking time to reflect for yourself too when you think, oh, that's not exactly how I thought that was going to go. An accountability partner can be really great. You need somebody that you can turn to or that you can call, and you can absolutely do the freak out in such a non-ministerial way. Be a human being for a moment and not be judged for that. And then step back into your ministerial response, collected and reflective. And be gentle, because every experience is a learning. Okay. So here we are. I'm going to come back into the group. You can try to roll out some pieces of your communication playbook just by maybe incorporating some things in your verbiage, in your conversations, because I feel this is important. I think this is the way that we can go forward with this, because you know how important integrity, trust, etc., being heard is to me. Let's make sure that that happens. You know how important that is in our community. Try out the 5 questions on yourself or another. When they come in, you can put them on a sticky note or something under your desk. You can just ask them. I'm joking. Try that moving people into action tool. That is amazing. That is absolutely amazing, because you're trusting them to go off and do that. Next month, we're doing community growth through social and business outreach. So if there are organizations that you think you might like to be approaching and that you haven't had the time or the confidence to approach, this is a great time to start thinking about those. And we have April 25th. I'm going to go back to our group here. So April 25th is when we'll meet for number 8, the business and social outreach. It's different from the date that I had declared for you folks, okay? April 18th is what I had declared. I've put it to the 25th, and if it really bothers a whole group of people, I will work it out. But it turns out I'll be in Jordan, and the internet is not as reliable as the following week. I'll be in London on the 25th, so the internet tends to be a little bit more reliable from London. It'll be a little later for me, but that's all fine. And so I just want to make sure that I'm able to be with you. That being said, I'm in Toronto, and we had a little glitch at the beginning, so much for assumptions. But I just know in general, it's better if I'm doing it not in the Middle East for their bandwidth in countries. So I'm going to open. We're at time, but I want to open up and just see if there's anything anyone wants to say or comment. That was a lot, and maybe there's something that you're thinking, I want to take that and try it out. I'm going to pull it out of the slides, dust it off, and give it a shot. Anything standing out for you?
Well, this is Cassandra, and I mean, I love all of it. Thank you so much. And I think one of the best conflict resolution tools that the ED at my last center, she so often had us ask, well, what are you needing and wanting here? And that seemed to cut through a lot of the conflict, like really, really quickly, just discovering what are the needs and wants, because oftentimes it's driving a lot of the behavior and the words without being expressed.
Yeah. What do you need right now is one I've heard too. So people will stay out of the story and just be like, in that moment, sometimes the answer is coffee. If I have a coffee and you give me 10 minutes, we're going to have a very different conversation. And it can be much deeper than that, of course.
Heard recently is to preface a conversation that could go into a conflict, or that you're expecting there is some conflict around with. So the story I'm telling myself around this is, and would you be willing to dialogue about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that is in Jim Dethmer's Conscious Leadership, the 15 statements of conscious leadership. Yeah, he does workshops and does a lot of work around that. The story I'm making up is, and that's excellent. It doesn't carry as much weight. You're not clobbering someone with your beliefs about how they're wrong. You're just saying, like, help me understand this. Yeah.
I feel like one of the things that I need to get better at maybe is actually pushing people to conflict. That there's so much niceness where you see that there is an underlying tension, but it doesn't get expressed. And because it doesn't get expressed, one person or the other ends up just withdrawing and and going away. And instead of, like, I think it would be really valuable to be able to poke the bear and, you know, let's get the conversation happening, because what is the most crazy making for me is when I don't know what is going on underneath the surface, and I really want to know. I really want that to be raised to the surface so that I can deal with whatever is happening there, and you know, have a really authentic conversation. And I often feel like that doesn't happen. And in my life, I tend to be good with poking the bear in other situations, but I draw back from doing that in ministry because I'm concerned that you know, that's, the minister's not supposed to be poking the bear, you know.
Stephanie's laughing. She's smiling a lot there. So I'm thinking, like, where she is, it might be all bear, all poking all day. But a couple of questions along the line of Jim Deathman's work as well is, what is not being said? So I know I've asked that in senior level rooms before, like what's not being said, and sometimes I'll do it on sticky notes so people don't have to reveal what's not being said here. Or if you could have something happen without any worries about how it impacted anyone else, what would it be? You know, you get people into really safe spaces of revealing, then that can do a lot of that foundational work. And you're right, like a whole chunk, Cassandra, just shifts. It's like all of a sudden, like all these, you know, chopped down trees have been moved out of the path and you can walk through now. It's like, woo, we can even see the end. We might even agree what the end looks like now. You know, yeah, it's beautiful. So it would be great if there's anything that you try that's particularly helpful, share it with the group too. Okay.
I know that we're out of time, but it also makes me wonder about actually speaking to this from the pulpit and actually bringing it like to that level of awareness, to actually bringing up this from a sermon and even offering a workshop on it. I don't even know if that's like a good idea. It just makes me think about addressing community issues, you know, from the pulpit.
The fact that you are concerned about whether you think it's a good idea probably means it's perfect. And ripe and there. How about we round down on that? I'll just do a quick benediction. We'll close out. Okay, so we'll just close our eyes and take this time to breathe and just acknowledging this divine appointment among colleagues, community leaders here, all in our different places and our different spaces, and all united in this desire to move through conflict more consciously. And so I call this time complete. In gratitude, I thank everyone. I thank the opportunity for being here, and for the people who will be able to watch this on recording here. And so let's just wind this down with an inhale and a breath out, releasing all into the divine. And so it is. Wonderful. Okay. So